In a store, a young man examines the case for the current best-selling game, Sword Rhapsodia. He notes its premise. A hero must save the heroines and fight alongside them to defeat the Demon King. He cynically dismisses it as a standard, average story aimed at a male audience. Back in his room, he observes the game's cover once more, acknowledging the heroine's appeal before muttering a curse under his breath. Frustration becomes clear as he plays the game. He is incensed by a villainous noble character, Shin Darkside, who embodies a combination of arrogance, greed, and laziness, and constantly torments the game's protagonist in petty ways. This animosity fuels a new resolve. He will clear every single route in the game just to witness this scum's inevitable ruin. This end, he commits himself completely, performing a full deep dive into the game's world by studying strategy guides, world books, summary websites, and even developer interviews. After an immense effort, he collapses onto his floor, utterly spent. He declares his mission complete, having seen every route where the villainous Shin Darkside falls into ruin and becomes a sacrifice to the Demon King. Lying motionless, he reflects on his accomplishment with a sense of bitter disappointment. He had completed all of it, yet the game's creators showed no mercy. There was not a single ending where the villain he had come to know so well was saved. His consciousness fades and then abruptly returns. He finds himself standing in an unfamiliar, opulent room, now wearing the formal attire of a noble. Before him, a maid kneels on the ground as a head butler stands nearby. Utterly bewildered, he can only think. His gaze drops to his own hand, which is transformed into a monstrous, pitch-black appendage with sharp claws. Panic sets in as he questions where he is, the origin of this hand, and the chaotic situation he has been thrust into. He struggles to make sense of it all, his mind racing back to what he last remembers, completing the game and then falling asleep. The name, Lord Shin, echoes in his thoughts, and a horrifying realization begins to dawn. As he stands frozen by this revelation, the head butler bows deeply, startling him. The butler offers a sincere apology, explaining that he failed to educate the maid properly and insists that he should be the one punished. The young man, now Shin, can only stare, completely overwhelmed by his new reality. He lay on the floor, disoriented, wondering what was happening. A flood of memories, not his own, poured into his mind, bringing with them a horrifying realization of his new identity, Shin Darkside. Truth crashed down upon him. He had been reincarnated into the game world, and of all the possible roles, he had become the one character he despised most, that piece of trash villain. Overwhelmed by the sudden shift in reality and forgetting his new, arrogant persona, he instinctively reacted to the tense situation he'd woken into. He shot up, flustered, and stammered a panicked apology to the head butler before him. His outburst sent a wave of disbelief through the room. Elri's and another maid could only stare, their eyes wide with utter shock. Astonishment was so profound it seemed to echo throughout the entire estate, a silent, collective question hanging in the air. Did Lord Shin just apologize? Facing the stunned silence of his retainers, he wondered aloud if he had said something strange, oblivious to the magnitude of his gaffe. Desperately needed to be alone to process everything. Announcing that he was returning to his room to figure things out, he turned to leave. Behind him, the head butler stood frozen, a single thought running through his mind. Shin never apologizes to anyone. As he hurried away, the full weight of his new reality crashed down. He accepted the reincarnation, but lamented his fate. He was now a scumbag villain whose story was filled with ruin flags. No matter which path the story took, he knew his life would always end in ruin, sacrificed to the final boss, the Greed Demon King. He recalled a critical piece of lore. Shin possessed a unique skill called Gluttonous Demon King, supposedly the strongest in the story. However, in this world, any skill bearing the name Demon King was considered a disaster. If anyone discovered he had it, he would be executed immediately. Even the original Shin hid it, passing it off as dark attribute magic. His fate seemed sealed from the moment he was reincarnated. But then, a flicker of defiance sparked within him. He had to do something. Standing before a mirror in his room, his resolve hardened. He still possessed his almost perfect knowledge of the original story, and now he also had the game's strongest skill. With these two assets, he would fight his fate. He focused his will and uttered the command, skill, activate. He unleashes his power, calling out its name, Gluttonous Demon King. A torrent of dark energy erupts around him. He recognizes this as an offensive, dark attribute skill, as villainous as it gets. This power manifests as dark aura manipulation, allowing him to shape the raw energy into various forms. He tests this, imagining a weapon. The aura responds instantly, taking shape. He is amazed, noting that because it's made of aura, it's incredibly light, yet sturdy enough for combat. The energy solidifies into a menacing black spear. However, he knows this is not the skill's true strength that lies in his right hand, which transforms into a monstrous, clawed appendage. This is gluttony, an ability that steals the magic power and skills of anyone it touches. Reflects on his knowledge of the game. He is 10 years old, 6 years before the main story begins. The ability to use stolen skills is already powerful, but he knows there's more. If he consumes enough magic power, the gluttonous demon king skill unlocks new abilities through stages. The original Shin never trained it and became a sacrifice. This immense growth potential is what makes the skill so incredibly broken. He realizes he has 6 years to train. A knock at the door interrupts his thoughts. His mate has brought tea. He wonders if, by using his game knowledge to acquire rare skills and unlocking his power's full potential, he could truly change Shin's fated demise. Tells her to come in. Elriais enters, her body trembling as she carries the tea tray. She looks utterly terrified. He gestures for her to set it down, trying to sound casual. As he reaches toward her, he notices her pale complexion and asks if she is all right. The simple gesture makes her flinch violently, letting out a sharp cry of fear. He freezes, the realization hitting him hard. He had acted without thinking again, coming across as nothing more than a selfish, power-tripping scumbag. Clenches his fist, berating himself internally. He had almost used his demonic skill on an innocent servant. Of course she would be terrified. I'm such a jerk, he thinks, his internal outburst causing Elriais to let out a startled yelp. Clenches his fist, overwhelmed with regret. He finally voices his apology, admitting that for the longest time, he has done nothing but cause pain. His intense self-reproach had caused him to strike his own face, leaving him with a bloody nose as he cries out his promise to never behave like a tyrant again. El stares, utterly shocked, realizing that Lord Shin is actually apologizing. Overwhelmed, she shouts that she understands and begs him to clean his face. Announcing she's going to fetch some eggs, she turns and flees the room in a fluster. Watches her depart, understanding that a sudden apology won't be enough. He must earn her trust back slowly. As he thinks, he tries to place her name, recalling it as El. His thoughts sharpen with a jolt of realization. He had been careless. This maid, Elriais, is one of the heroines from the original game story. He hadn't recognized it sooner because she looks and acts so much like a child. Delves deeper into his memories of the game. In that story, Elle was an expressionless maid who was a constant companion to the game's protagonist. Memory continues to unfold. The game's hero would eventually break through her emotional walls, discovering that the tyranny of Shin Darkside was the very cause of her withdrawn state. In that timeline, she would go on to assist the hero in exposing Shin's true nature and his misdeeds. Furthermore, it would be revealed that she possessed a powerful and unique skill of her own. A horrifying realization dawns on Shin. Elle herself is a harbinger of his ruin. He slams his fist on the table in self-loathing, furious that the lively Elle he knows is destined for a grim fate in the main story. His eyes fall upon a bottle, recognizing it as the most expensive antidote from the game he once played. Memory tied to the antidote surfaces. 6 years before the game's story began, Elle was attacked by bandits while shopping and afflicted with a lethal poison. It was Shin who made her an offer, exchanging the antidote for her lifelong servitude. Recalls how Elle became completely submissive to him after that day. The memory of her cheerfully announcing she was going shopping for eggs, the same activity she was doing when she was first attacked 6 years ago, flashes through his mind. Connection snaps into place with sudden, terrifying clarity. Shin bolts from his chair, startling head butler Oliver. As he rushes past, Oliver calls out in concern, asking what the matter is and if Elle has already departed. He whirls around, his face a mask of panic, and confronts Oliver. He demands to know why the butler is even asking if she left, shouting for a straight answer. Butler's grim expression confirms his fears. Oliver states that L left right after serving him tea. The words strike Shin with the force of a physical blow. Determined, Shin sprints through the city streets with Oliver struggling to keep pace. The butler points ahead, explaining that L is likely at the market she usually visits. Shin can only pray that he makes it in time. They arrive at a scene of chaos. A burly thief holds L hostage, a knife pressed to her throat. He bellows for the market-goers to leave everything and flee if they value their lives. As Shin and Oliver appear, Shin cries out L's name in horror. His heart plummets as he sees a wound on L's shoulder. He was too late. The thief notices their arrival, sneering as he asks if they know the girl. The thief then turns his attention fully to Shin, his expression menacing. He warns Shin to get lost as well, lest he end up like the pitiful maid, pressing the blade of his knife against L's skin. He glares at the thief, his eyes burning with fury as a dark energy envelopes his arm. He demands to know what the man did to his ruined flag. From the sidelines, the newly arrived Oliver can only utter Lord Shin's name in disbelief. Shin unleashes his power, dark aura manipulation. From this swirling darkness, he summons a flock of shadowy constructs, shouting their name, Black Eagles. The spectral birds descend upon the marketplace with terrifying speed. One of the eagles, solidifying from shadow, pierces the thief's arm, forcing him to drop his knife and release his hostage. The man groans in pain as Shin rushes past the stunned onlookers, who wonder at the sudden swarm of dark birds. As the thief crumples to the ground, Shin reaches L's side, desperately asking if she is all right. Oliver watches from a distance, sweat beading on his brow, shocked that Lord Shin just saved someone. His relief is short-lived as he sees the dark veins of poison spreading from the wound on L's shoulder. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he turns to Oliver, ordering him to take care of the thief and handing him a small vial, pleading for him to give it to L. Thief, though injured, feels an oppressive presence from the young lord and warns him not to get cocky. Shin ignores the threat, his monstrous black hand extended as he declares the thief his target. With cold determination, he slams his clawed hand onto the thief's head, activating his unique skill, Gluttony. A dark pulse of energy emanates from the point of contact. The thief lets out a final gasp and collapses, completely drained of his magic. Shin notes that he won't be moving for a while. Suddenly, a spark of light appears in his own hand. He feels he has acquired a new, powerful skill from his victim. He tells Oliver he will examine it later, then turns back to his butler, demanding to know why he is hesitating to administer the antidote to L. Oliver. Holding the precious item, explains with due respect that it is a high-grade antidote, the only one the household possesses, and cannot be used carelessly. His face contorted in a mask of pure rage and desperation. Shin bellows at his subordinate. He screams that someone is dying right in front of them, and that he must use the antidote immediately. His desperate command still echoing, he rushes towards L's side. Behind him, the head butler Oliver, sweating profusely, offers his deepest apologies and confirms he will administer the antidote immediately. Potion takes effect instantly. L's heart, once frozen like ice by the fast-acting poison, is now unmistakably filled with a spreading warmth. The warmth spreads. She sits up, color returning to her face. She murmurs her thanks, relieved that the antidote worked so quickly. Nearby, both Shin and Oliver pant, exhausted from the ordeal but visibly relieved. Turns to his butler, apologizing for getting carried away in his panic. His attention then shifts to the subdued thief on the cobblestones, and he asks Oliver what should be done with the scoundrel. From a distance, one of Shin's retainers watches the aftermath. He reflects that this is the first time an incident of this magnitude has occurred since he began serving the young lord, especially considering his master's known merciless nature. Back with the main group, Oliver offers his stern counsel. He declares that since the man attempted to harm Lord Shin, execution would be an entirely justified punishment. Shin, however, has a different plan. He instructs Oliver to hand the man over to the guards to be judged by the law. The butler is taken aback, but Shin is even more shocked at the implication that he himself should be the executioner, adamantly refusing the notion. Turns to his butler and poses a question. Would Oliver execute a commoner just for bumping into him? Shin reasons that if he were to punish people however he pleased, he would be nothing more than a tyrant. He then accepts responsibility, stating that the bandit's very existence is his own doing. Stands over the fallen man, the image of his impoverished subjects filling his mind. He acknowledges that while the thief must be judged for his crimes, the root cause was likely poverty, a failure on his part as their lord. With this realization, he concludes that he has no right to personally judge the man. Hearing this, Oliver's stern expression softens into one of profound understanding. Observing his master with newfound respect, he murmurs that Lord Shin has truly changed. Drops to one knee before his lord. Overcome with emotion, Oliver formally pledges to devote himself entirely to serving Shin. His declaration is unexpectedly echoed by Elle. With a sudden burst of energy, shouts that she too will do her best to serve him. The outburst startles Shin, who realizes the joy of seeing his master's change of heart has overshadowed her pain. He quickly urges her to go rest, gently tells Elle there is no need for repayment and that she shouldn't belittle herself. He looks at her sincerely, affirming that she is already a wonderful person. Internally, he recalls that she even possesses a unique skill. Her face flushes as she whispers that no one has ever said that to her before. Witnessing her powerful reaction, Shin is momentarily confused, wondering why his approval rating seems to have suddenly skyrocketed. Sudden realization strikes Shin. Elle confesses that as an orphan, she has always felt worthless, and he is the first person to ever call her wonderful. The words trigger a memory for Shin. This was a key piece of dialogue from the original story. He understands now that it was he, not the story's protagonist, who has just opened her heart. Looking up at the sky, he feels a wave of relief. He has successfully avoided the ruined flag concerning Elle. This means he can now proceed with the plan he formulated back at the mansion. Clenches his fist, his resolve hardening. He will continue to avoid disaster, train his gluttonous demon king skill, defeat the demon king, survive, and achieve his own Shin ending. As he steels himself, he sees Oliver leading Elle away, who promises to tell the other maids of his kindness. Scene shifts violently to a military encampment where a panicked guard bursts in. He shouts a report. A stampede of monsters, around 200 strong, is heading directly for them. The other soldiers are thrown into chaos, knowing their current forces cannot possibly deal with such a massive threat. Amid the ensuing carnage, one furious soldier with a scar over his eye glares into the fray. He snarls that if their lord wasn't such a stupid brat, none of this would have ever happened. Lord Shin's eyes widened in disbelief. The information he had just received was staggering. The tax rate was an impossible 70%. As he walked through the manor, flanked by his staff, his mind reeled. He questioned how anyone could survive under such oppressive taxes. The public order in the territory was a disaster, just as Oliver had stated. Shin knew he had to do something about it immediately, and noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The maid seemed more calm than before. He glanced towards Elle, who met his gaze with a bright, expectant look, and he wondered if he was somehow the cause. His unspoken question was answered with a burst of energy. Oliver explained that, of course, Shin was the reason for the change. Elle had been enthusiastically telling everyone the heroic tale of how he had saved her from the thief, boosting the morale of the entire staff. Seeing her so full of life, Oliver addressed Elle directly, noting that since she was clearly feeling better, she should return to her duties. She, however, completely ignored the head butler. With a determined gleam in her eye, she declared that she would dedicate her life to her savior and was now Lord Shin's personal maid. Oliver protested that it wasn't her choice to make, but Shin's internal thoughts were of weary resignation. He felt that despite his best efforts, he had somehow managed to enslave her through his actions. As the group arrived before a large, fortified door, Oliver announced their destination. They had reached the treasury. Inside, mounds of gold, jewels, and artifacts glittered. Oliver explained that this was the late lord's inheritance, all the wealth of the house gathered in one place. After a brief moment of assessment, Shin gave a simple, stunning order: sell everything. His reasoning was just as radical. He declared that if they were just going to hoard the treasure, they might as well sell it all and give the money back to the people. He then formalized his decree, announcing that starting tomorrow, they would reduce taxes to a level that wouldn't harm the territory. His serious proclamation, however, was immediately followed by a comical one. Spotting a frilly dress on a mannequin, He pointed and adamantly shouted that he was also not going to wear a dress, much to the quiet amusement of his staff. Butler Oliver processes his lord's command. He confirms the plan. For the first 2 years, the tax rate will be halved, with the Darkside family's assets covering any losses. As he agrees, he can't help but wonder what has happened to Shin. He muses that it isn't just a simple change. It's as if Shin has become a completely different person. His thoughts are interrupted by the sight of a large hawk soaring towards the manor. Bird, a carrier hawk, swoops down towards Shin, and Shin immediately recognizes it as a messenger from the Night Order. He takes the message and reads it, his expression turning grim. The report is dire. Monster activity in the Great Forest is increasing drastically. He concludes that the Knights are most likely requesting reinforcements. Message refers to the vast, dense woodland on the edge of the Darkside territory. The Great Forest, now a place echoing with monstrous roars. In that forest, the battle is already underway. A knight is violently struck down by an unseen foe. Knights are overwhelmed, their defensive line struggling against a horde of monsters. A commander shouts for his men to hold their ground, knowing they must protect the line at all costs. If the monsters break through, their families and homes will be in danger. His orders are not enough. Another knight is brutally slain before his very eyes. The commander watches in horror, realizing with dread that they must not let the monsters pass. Looks up to see a massive, dark energy attack hurtling towards him. Powerless, he can only curse his fate. The blow never lands. Shin Darkside appears in a flash, his gluttony skill manifesting as a massive, dark shield that blocks the attack. With L at his side, he stands as the last line of defense, leaving the knight to stare in utter disbelief. Sudden appearance on the battlefield sends a ripple of shock through the ranks. A knight with light-colored hair stares, his eyes wide with disbelief as he recognizes not only Sir Oliver, but also Lord Shin himself. Amidst the confusion, his maid puffs her cheeks in annoyance at being overlooked and loudly declares that her name is L, prompting the knight to question why a maid is even present. Her outburst only adds to Shin's own confusion. As he wonders what she is doing there, the knight, Raiga, dismisses the interruption and orders the two newcomers to hold the line while he provides support on the front. Before he can respond, Shin feels the piercing stares from the other soldiers, sensing they don't want him there. Meanwhile, Raiga resolves to fight alongside his men to change his fate and earn their trust before turning to Shin and demanding to know what he is doing on the battlefield. Without waiting for an answer, Raiga leaps forward, unleashing a powerful sword skill called Steel Splitter. As the attack cleaves through a monster, he glances back at Shin, remarking that he has no taste for being a mere spectator. He is identified as Raiga, Knight Commander of the Darkside territory. Reckless display makes Oliver break into a cold sweat. He stares in horror, realizing the attack passed dangerously close to his lord, and wonders if Raiga was actually trying to hit Shin. Same suspicion fuels Elle's anger. She marches up to Raiga, pointing out that he was standing right in front of a monster. Raiga scoffs, questioning why he should care about some outsider. Her eyes narrow with fury at his callous dismissal. She leans in close and accuses him directly, stating that he really was trying to hit him. Before the confrontation can escalate, Shin calmly calls out to Elle, telling her not to change the subject. He then fixes his gaze on Raiga, pointedly asking why a maid is on the battlefield in the first place. His question is an order in disguise. He tells Elle to get back to work, and she immediately scurries off with a simple okay. The helmeted knight watches her swift obedience, a bead of sweat on his temple. Turned to Raiga, apologizing for the trouble and asking for an update on the situation. His words were met with scorn from a nearby, wounded knight, who bitterly pointed out that they had reached their limit with many injured, all because Shin had sent no reinforcements. The accusation stirred a deep-seated resentment in Raiga. A single tear traced a path down his cheek as he thought bitterly that perhaps it was better this way, to avoid wasting money on what he considered useless trash. He vowed he would never forgive Shin for simply standing by and watching. His internal bitterness erupted into a shout. He told the rich brat playing spectator to go home, revealing the overwhelming odds they faced, 200 monsters. Hearing the number, Shin's expression shifted not to fear, but to a chilling smile. 200? Huh? He mused before declaring it perfect. He then addressed Raiga directly, apologizing for his past actions and promising that from that moment forward, he would act. His promise was punctuated by a surge of dark energy. With newfound resolve, he vowed to protect everything he had failed to before, his gluttony and dark aura manipulation. Black Spring skills activating in a torrent of power that left Raiga stunned. He launched himself from the carriage, the dark aura coalescing around him, forming a deadly black spear as he plummeted towards the monstrous horde. Spear found its mark, instantly felling one of the beasts. A nearby knight could only gasp as he witnessed the sudden, lethal strike. As Raiga cried out his name in astonishment, Shin unleashed another attack. With a focused glare, he summoned black thorns, causing jagged spikes of pure darkness to erupt from the ground. Thorns shot up with devastating force, impaling multiple monsters in a single, brutal display. The battlefield fell momentarily silent as Raiga and the other knights stared, dumbfounded by the sheer scale of the attack. Shock gave way to awe. Raiga noted Shin's incredible speed and how he was covering the other knights. A cheer rose from the soldiers. With half the monsters already gone, their despair turned to hope. They rallied behind Lord Shin, their fighting spirit renewed, leaving Raiga to wonder if this truly was a different person before him. Watched Shin's retreating form, his expression intense. Turning to Oliver, he questioned whether the head butler truly saw their new lord as a mere spectator. Head butler held Raiga back, reminding him of what Lord Shin had said before the battle began, that the only way to earn his trust back is to fight himself. The revelation struck Raiga, who could only stammer in disbelief. Couldn't believe that the heartless boy had said such a thing. Meanwhile, Shin internally acknowledged that his true objective was simply to upgrade his gluttonous Demon King skill and acquire more power, deciding it was best to keep that to himself. Shin continued on. He called back a warning to Raiga, advising him not to get too close to L on the battlefield. When Raiga asked for an explanation, Shin noted that her ice attribute doesn't work well with certain other abilities, specified that her ice was incompatible with Raiga's flame slash. The former knight commander was utterly shocked, demanding to know how Shin could possibly know about a skill he had only recently learned himself. In response, Shin simply pointed to his own eye, revealing the source of his knowledge, a skill called Eye of Truth. Raiga was stunned into silence. He had never heard of such a skill that could perceive the abilities of one's subordinates, such as his own advanced swordsmanship and intermediate flame slash. Nearby, Elle chimed in cheerfully, admitting she was also shocked when she first learned of it. With a smile, she declared that with Lord Shin, such incredible things were to be expected, as a display confirmed her own unique skill, Absolute Ice. He awkwardly accepted her praise, before admitting to himself that he had simply gotten lucky. The Eye of Truth wasn't something he developed, but useful skill he had stolen from the thief he'd encountered earlier. He continues to use his Eye of Truth, analyzing Oliver's advanced swordsmanship and martial arts. He realizes he can use this power to identify key individuals and will no longer miss the chance to acquire rare skills. Raiga, still reeling from the previous revelation, questions Shin's comment about him, at least getting stronger. Suddenly, the ground beneath them erupts. Sensing the danger an instant before the others, Shin shouts for everyone to dodge as massive earthen spikes burst from the ground. Raiga is thrown off balance, grunting in surprise. From the dust and debris emerges the source of the attack, a monstrous high orc wielding a colossal warhammer. A nearby knight notes that a single hit from such a creature would be fatal. Raiga urges everyone to fall back, insisting they don't stand a chance. But Shin steps forward, telling Raiga to wait as he will handle it. Turns to them, his face a mask of resolve, and insists he will be fine. He declares that he won't let anyone get hurt, for he has finally met the conditions for his skill's evolution. A surge of power confirms it. 100 monster units of magic power have been absorbed. Harnessing this new power, he slams his hand to the ground and invokes a new ability, Antimatter. A sheer wall of pure black energy erupts before him, marking the arrival of the second stage of his gluttonous Demon King skill. Raiga stares at the newly formed barrier, exclaiming in disbelief that it's just a wall, and a thin one at that. Shin calmly clarifies that it is no ordinary wall. The High Orc, unimpressed, charges forward, swinging its massive hammer at the fragile-looking defense. The knights watch in terror, one questioning if Shin will be alright, while another notes that the wall is thinner than their shields, but that its dark energy has drastically amplified. The deafening crash. The massive hammer strikes the dark barrier. Shin stands his ground, a small, unmoving silhouette against the immense impact. Watching from a safe distance, Elriai's expression is fraught with worry for Shin and for herself. Concern is met with a terrifying sight. The High Orc's hammer begins to dissolve where it touches the wall. The dark energy engulfs it, a swirling void that consumes anything it touches. He unleashes the full might of his gluttony skill. A torrent of pure darkness erupts from the ground, instantly engulfing the High Orc. The massive creature is thrown off its feet as the void begins to consume whole. Consuming darkness works with terrifying speed, causing the High Orc's powerful body to disintegrate into nothingness. As the last traces of the monster vanish, Shin's companions stare in stunned silence. Oliver wonders aloud if Shin truly killed the giant by himself, while Elriais simply whispers with reverence, "That is, our Lord." Shin, however, is focused on a different problem, muttering as he notices the tip of his shoe has been eaten away. He realizes with this power, he can't even hold weapons he creates. This display of overwhelming force leaves Raiga visibly shaken. He concludes that such an ability is best suited for defense or traps. Flashes back to just moments before the battle, recalling the cheeky brat who hung back and smiled like an idiot, a stark contrast to the terrifying figure of power he is now. The weight of this realization brings Raiga to his knees before his lord. He begins to speak, stating that if Shin truly meant his earlier vow to protect everything Raiga couldn't, then he cannot forgive him. But his statement hangs unfinished. Instead, he finishes his thought with a silent, resolute decision. He will trust him. A fiery, bird-like familiar appears, symbolizing his renewed pledge. Symbol of his commitment soars away, marking a definitive turning point. Far away, in a tranquil forest spring, the small, fiery creature lands with a splash. It turns to its companion and asks what is wrong. Its companion, a long-haired individual bathing in the water, simply smiles. They note that the forest has become noisy, adding with a light chuckle that they enjoy it when things get a little lively. In the aftermath of the battle, Raiga leans on his sword, sweating but relieved. He declares that this should suffice for now and commends everyone for their good work. Beside him, an exhausted Elriais insists that they are the ones who should be thanking Lord Shin. In response, Shin calmly observes that their pursuers are not following. He then addresses the group, giving them permission to return to the territory. The order catches Raiga completely by surprise. As his companions process his command, Shin's gaze drifts towards the distant mountains. He internally confirms his true purpose. There is something he must still do within this forest. Hearing his intention to remain, a worried Elriais immediately offers to accompany him. She praises his greatness, but questions why he isn't tired like everyone else after such a fight. Turns to her with a gentle smile, raising a hand to reassure her. He promises that he will be fine and won't do anything dangerous, adding that there is another reason he must go alone. Having parted ways with his retinue, Shin arrives at a sign marking the Great Spirit Springs. He reflects that this task must be done alone to have any meaning, recognizing it as a location typically accessed later in the game. As he steps forward, a serene voice welcomes him to the innermost spring. He looks up to find the source of the voice, an ethereal woman with long, light hair and a glowing halo, bathing in the spring. Shin internally notes her stunning beauty, recognizing her as a fan favorite. The being introduces herself as Silsha, the great spirit who presides over all life, and asks what brings a human to her domain. The small bird-like familiar rests on her hand. Silsha remarks that their conversation does not seem like it will be a pleasant one. Undeterred, Shin states his purpose directly. He is there to acquire two skills, spirit healing and blessing of the Great Spirit. Nature of his request hangs in the air. Spirit healing is a skill that heals all wounds, poisons, and curses, while blessing of the Great Spirit is a passive ability boosting resistance to status conditions. Shin knows these are essential, overpowered skills required to achieve the Shin ending. His request is met with an immediate refusal from the spirit's avian familiar, which flatly states it cannot be done before questioning his motives. Great Spirit Silsha herself elaborates. explaining that she cannot grant such power to one who possesses the demon king factor. If a person with that power were to misuse it, the very order of the world could be shattered. Standing by the water's edge, Shin acknowledges her reasoning, admitting he had anticipated this response. He internally concedes that her assessment of the Demon King as a threat to humanity is correct. The history of these powers is grim. The 7 Demon King skills, greed, pride, indolence, wrath, lust, envy, and gluttony, have invariably brought disaster upon humanity whenever they have manifested. Thoughts drift to a painful memory from his past life, recalling that it was one of these 7, the strongest, the agreed Demon King, who was responsible for his death in the game. He turns back to Silsha, his resolve hardening. He explains that to defeat this powerful foe, he must gather as many rare skills as possible. He insists he will not misuse her power and offers to prove his worthiness through the trial. Silsha questions how he could possibly know of such a thing, but he can only offer his solemn promise. Seeing his conviction, Silsha listens. He places a hand over his heart, vowing that if his words are true, he will use the 2 skills for the sake of his own survival and for the protection of all humanity. His vow resonates with the Great Spirit. She agrees to his request, stating that she will judge him through the trial according to his wishes. As she speaks, a golden goblet filled with a swirling liquid magically materializes before him. Reaches out, his hands closing around the vessel as Silsha instructs him to drink the sacred wine it contains. Stares into his own reflection in the dark liquid, his expression firm. From behind him, Silsha's voice carries a stark warning. If he is found unworthy, the sacred wine will transform into an incurable and deadly poison the moment he drinks it. Gravity of the test gives him pause as he contemplates what it means to be worthy. Silsha observes him, her own thoughts filled with doubt. She believes that as a successor to the Demon King, he surely cannot possess the qualities required to pass. Requirements to overcome this trial were absolute. Not only benevolence to enact justice, but the courage to stake one's own life. Even a good man would fail if he lacked courage and faltered before drinking. Silsha watched him, asking what was wrong and if he was scared, reminding him that the wine would become a merciless poison for the unworthy. But Shin showed no fear. Instead, a confident grin spread across his face as he declared that she might as well fill the cup to the brim. Confidence was not born of ignorance. He recalled that this section of the game was a cruel trap designed for first-time players. Memory of the game's rules flashed in his mind. The trial tested one's ability to drink without hesitation. Any delay, even hovering over the no option, meant failure. Armed with this knowledge, he brought the goblet to his lips and drank it all in one swift, decisive motion. Watching him, Silsha was stunned. He hadn't hesitated for even a moment. He lowered the now empty cup, a playful look in his eyes. He had passed the trial, and with a smirk, he even asked if he could get any seconds. His bold request seemed to clarify something for Silsha. Shin explained that she should understand now. He is different from the other Demon Kings and has a different purpose. A gentle smile formed on her lips as she conceded. She agreed that regardless of who he may be, he had passed the trial. As a glow emanated from her hand, she declared that she would grant him the skills he desired. A torrent of power surged from her and enveloped him. Shin gasped in astonishment as a swirling vortex of light and energy surrounded him completely. In the maelstrom of power, he felt a profound change. His body was recovering at an incredible rate thanks to the blessing of the Great Spirit, and he could feel a new, overpowered skill awakening. He realized his chances of survival had just skyrocketed. Turns with a bright smile, ready to depart. "Thanks, Silsha," he says cheerfully. "Now then, I'll be on my way." A flicker of confusion crosses his face, as if surprised by his own words. As he begins to walk away, Silsha urgently calls for him to wait. She expresses her lingering worry, questioning if a skill was transferred correctly and voicing a fear that it might fail him in the future. She thinks to herself that it's probably fine, but the anxiety remains. Turns back toward her, baffled by her concern. "You granted it," he points out. "Why are you worrying so much?" His direct question leaves the Great Spirit flustered and at a loss for words. Seeing her hesitation, he presses further, asking if there is something else she wants to say. Silsha looks down, fidgeting as she struggles to find the right words, muttering indecisively. Finally, she asks if he is truly leaving already. The question catches Shin off guard. He internally questions her sudden change in personality, noting that this interaction never occurred in the original story he remembers. His eyes narrow as a crucial memory surfaces. He recalls that in the original story, everything proceeds smoothly until the protagonist acquires the skills from the Great Spirit. He remembers a specific detail from the game. As the protagonist leaves, Silsha says something that the character cannot comprehend, a line of dialogue that remained an unexplained mystery. The words were, "You're leaving too, aren't you?" Memory clicks into place. He realizes that while the game's protagonist couldn't grasp her meaning, by experiencing the event himself, he can finally understand the true sentiment behind her words. This new understanding, he looks at the visibly distressed Great Spirit and asks directly, "Could it be you're feeling lonely here?" Startled, Silsha vehemently denies it, insisting she is fine and used to being alone before telling him to leave. Turns away, a bead of sweat on his temple. Behind him, Silsha's composure breaks completely. She flails her arms, complaining loudly about how cold he is being and reminding him of her status as a great spirit. Crouched by the water's edge, a thoughtful expression on his face. Below him, Silsha looked up from the spring, her initial irritation gone, replaced by a direct question. Did he wish to form a contract and join her? The offer caught him off guard, but he admitted that something had indeed been troubling him. He elaborated on his troubles, explaining that his territory was in a poor state due to internal affairs, and he wished to borrow the power of a goddess who presides over life. Silsha, attempting to maintain a dignified front, nonchalantly agreed, stating she supposed she could come along if he insisted. Her composure shattered moments later, and she desperately pleaded to join him, promising she would never cause trouble again. 1 month passed. The time that followed, the effects of the new arrangement became clear. Elri's, beaming with joy, presented an enormous ear of corn and a massive head of cabbage to Lord Shin, exclaiming that they had another great harvest that day. He gestured to a long dining table, now completely covered in produce. Shin stared in amazement at the sheer quantity. Elri's explained that the vendors had an overabundance and simply gave her the extras. As they stood before him, Oliver confirmed that this prosperity was all due to the contract with Silsha. The goddess, now clad in a dark uniform, smiled with satisfaction. Thanks to her blessing, the soil had improved considerably, allowing agriculture to thrive, food quality to rise, and employment to increase. With this, Shin reflected that the territory's internal affairs were finally under control, a success he attributed to both his leadership and Silsha's guidance. His success, however, was built on the emotional confession that had preceded it. Silsha had finally broken, shouting that of course she was lonely. She demanded to know if he could possibly understand how hard it was to be alone for over 1,000 years. As Shin watched, he realized her entire divine character had just crumbled. She lamented that her only companions were the birds that visited every now and then. Stoic expression betrayed his inner thoughts. As a guard sprinted frantically past the doorway in the background, Shin could only think to himself that if only that one event hadn't occurred, things might be different. The guard burst into the room, his face pale with panic. He yelled that it was an emergency. He delivered the unbelievable report. They were receiving word of pumpkins running loose all across the territory. Upon hearing this news, both Shin and Oliver slapped their hands to their faces in shared exasperation. Not again, they muttered in unison. His frustration boiled over as he recalled the previous calamities caused by the blessing. First, 10-meter-tall tulips, and then corn that was unbearably spicy. With Elri's watching from behind, he grimaced, realizing he had completely underestimated the consequences. He cursed himself, thinking he should have explicitly excluded wheat and grapes from the blessing's influence. Stormed through the halls, his fury barely contained. Brushing past his butler, he bellowed for the one responsible for the current chaos. Silsha found her in a state of complete disarray, lounging amidst empty bottles. She greeted him with a cheerful, slurred question, but he was in no mood for pleasantries. He demanded to know why she was drunk in the middle of the day. When she tried to deny it, he pointed to her flickering halo as undeniable proof of her inebriation, accusing her of being the cause of the mess once more. Oliver apologized profusely, explaining that the Great Spirit had unfortunately developed an addiction to human alcohol. Shin had a brief flashback to her very first drink. The memory did little to soothe his temper. He grabbed the intoxicated spirit, demanding an explanation for the reports of running pumpkins and accusing her of ruining the crops yet again. Her only response was a giggle question about a pumpkin-run dawn of the crops. This pushed Shin over the edge. "A picture book? Why don't you make a picture book about it?" he roared, his face contorted with exasperation. His voice echoed from the castle balcony as he delivered his final ultimatum. "That's it. Fix it or no more alcohol." The threat worked instantly. Silsha shrieked in panic, pleading for anything but that. With this chaotic resolution, the Great Spirit Silsha had officially joined Lord Shin's party. 6 months after his reincarnation, within the walls of the Darkside Castle, Lord Shin engages in a rigorous sword-sparring session with his butler, Oliver. A spectator notes that in just half a year of training, Shin's strikes have become impressively powerful, a testament to Oliver's skill as a teacher. He lunges, internally acknowledging his own top-tier potential and amazing pace of improvement. Oliver, however, is astounded by the boy's speed, thinking he could soon match even Raiga in combat. But the butler's sharp eyes spot a flaw. Shin's stance breaks as he overcommits, and Oliver seizes the opening. The swift, precise movement, Oliver disarms his young master, sending the training sword flying. He bellows that Shin's form is still too soft. Staring at his own trembling hand, Shin realizes his error. He had relaxed his grip, prematurely certain of victory. Butler stands over him, explaining that in a real sword fight, a single mistake can be fatal. He does concede, however, that Shin is definitely improving, admitting he was sure he would land a hit during their exchange. On the sidelines, Elriais and Silsha have formed an enthusiastic cheerleading squad for Lord Shin, much to Oliver's bewilderment. But Shin is lost in his own thoughts, grimly aware that he must become even stronger. He knows he is currently nowhere near powerful enough to defeat the Greed Demon King. Steels his resolve, deciding to move forward with his plan for the night. He reflects on his progress. He has been regularly killing monsters to absorb their magic with his gluttonous Demon King ability and has received advanced sword training from Oliver. The time has come to act. His objective is clear and singular: save the original heroine. The focus shifts to a dark, sewer-like tunnel, a location far outside the Darkside territory. Inside this grim place, a man with a cruel grin torments a captive woman with pointed ears. As crackling energy surrounds her, he commands her to squeeze more out, savoring her cries of pain. His tormentor is Jairosh, head of the 6th branch of the Demon King cult. He demands she offer more of her magic power to fuel the resurrection of the Greed Demon King, and the woman screams as her life force is violently extracted. Jairosh addresses his captive as Luna, thanking her for the contribution of her immense magic, which brings his master's reawakening closer. He then cruelly reminds her of her past, asking if she has forgotten being persecuted in her hometown because of the very curse mark on her left hand that he now controls. He continued his torment, telling Luna that he had saved her from slave traders, giving her a new purpose in life. She should be grateful, he insisted, for her role as a crucial part of the Greed Demon King's revival. Meanwhile, Shin stood amidst the aftermath of a battle he had just waged. Bodies of guards lay strewn across the street. He seethed with fury, thinking to himself that what the cult had done wasn't a rescue. It was a massacre. Back in the dungeon, Jairosh scoffed, dismissing Luna's suffering as a matter of perspective. He reminded her of how, once her curse mark appeared, her friends, teachers, and even her own parents had treated her as something filthy. He sneered, certain that she had no one on her side. His cruelty peaked as he leaned in close, telling her that no matter how much she cried, nobody would ever come to save her. Tears of pure despair streamed down Luna's face. At that very moment, a desperate cry for help echoed through a stone passageway. A cloaked figure, Shin, raced towards the sound, his form a blur of determined speed. He was met by cult guards, but they were no obstacle. He unleashed a swift sword skill, the late autumn lull, a display of advanced swordsmanship that cut them down instantly. A distant clash of steel reached Luna. Her head snapped up, her tear-filled eyes widening with shock and a dawning, uncertain hope. He looked up to a walkway above and saw the cloaked figure standing there, looking down at her. Stunned, she could only stammer, "Why you are?" Man extended a hand. "I'm Shin, Lord of Darkside," he announced. "I came to save you." As he spoke, a warm light enveloped Luna as he cast spirit healing, mending her wounds. She stared, utterly bewildered, told her not to move. With a sharp crack, the shackles binding her wrists shattered. Her body suddenly free, she questioned what was happening. Shin helped her up, and as they began to move, she managed a quiet thanks. He noted the lack of guards, unaware he had already cleared the path. He reflects on the effort it took to acquire the necessary skill, having had to find and absorb a monster's power to gain this stealth ability. When activated, it completely conceals his presence and magical power, a crucial tool for saving Luna. He then turns to the rescued elf, who cautiously asks how he knows her name. Realizing he needs to explain, Shin simply states he's glad she's safe and asks for her left hand for a moment. As he speaks, Luna questions his knowledge. He explains that, of course, he knows of her, the story of the greed demon king who plunged the world into chaos, and the 7 Sanuses who sealed his soul is common knowledge taught in history class. He continues, recounting how the Sanuses passed their power down to their descendants to prepare for the demon king's eventual reawakening. However, Luna interrupts, insisting that is not the whole story. Suspicion sharpens as she accuses him of lying. In response, Shin points to the mark on her hand, identifying it as the white lily crest, proof that she is a descendant. He clarifies that the greed demon king is kidnapping people like her, those with great magical power from all over the land. He then reveals his own grand objective, to rescue all the successors and form a resistance. A banner unfurls in concept, bearing a black eagle and the motto, Salus's State Pax. Shin elaborates that this resistance will eliminate the Demon King cult and ultimately defeat the Demon King himself. He shocks Luna by revealing that her role in this game is to become the leader of that very resistance. Grateful for being saved, Luna confesses she cannot bring herself to trust someone she just met. She reveals the depth of her pain. Her friends, her family, the entire world betrayed her. Hearing this, Shin quietly acknowledges her suffering with understanding. Elsewhere, the cultist Jairosh relaxes, pleased that his efforts to gather girls with cursed marks are proceeding well. He considers Luna top quality and fantasizes that if he keeps this up, he'll be promoted to an executive and win the favor of someone named Marionetta. As he basks in his ambition, a monstrous shadow looming behind him, his smug expression suddenly shatters. His eyes widen in absolute shock and disbelief at an unforeseen interruption. He reels back, stunned by the immense magic power that has just appeared out of nowhere. A figure materializes behind him, and Jairosh screams, identifying an enemy and ordering his men to intercept. Subordinates look around the stone chamber in confusion, unable to locate the source of the disturbance. One of them urgently shouts for everyone to gather together. Source of their confusion, Shin stands calmly beside Luna. He had initially planned to withdraw, knowing a fight while protecting her was risky. However, he realized this was a crucial opportunity. He had intentionally deactivated his stealth to reveal his overwhelming power, deciding that earning Luna's trust was more important than anything. His dark aura flares as he addresses the gathered cultists, informing them that by grouping together, they have made his job much easier. Jairosh's face twists in a furious scream, demanding to know who Shin is and why he is there. From Shin's perspective, he simply sees the one known as the gluttonous Demon King. In a desperate counterattack, Jairosh unleashes what he calls his ultimate technique. He thrusts his hand forward, shouting the name of the attack, Antimatter, as a massive dark rectangular construct hurtles towards Shin and Luna. Formidable attack dissipates into nothingness before it can reach them. Shin looks on, unimpressed, and coolly asks, "Is that all?" Luna Guachis, speechless, announces that it is now his turn. A huge amount of dark aura swirls and gathers at a single point between his hands, a technique of maximum dark energy compression. Jairosh can only stare in stunned silence. Shin unleashes the compressed power in a devastating attack he calls Shadow Burst. The blast erupts outward, completely engulfing Jairosh and shattering the surrounding chamber. Dust settles, revealing the night sky through the destroyed ceiling. Luna stares in amazement, realizing she is saved. Yet, she finds Shin's skill even more terrifying than Jairosh's and questions if she can trust him. Shin, meanwhile, panics, realizing his attack was far more powerful than intended and desperately hoping he didn't hurt any civilians. He sat beneath the full moon. The conflict concluded. As Luna watched him, she resolved to master her own magic so that no one would ever need to save her again. Shin, however, held a different thought. Anyone capable of taking her from him would be an evil far worse than the cultists he had just vanquished. Turning to him, her expression now gentle, Luna asked if he had chosen a name for the resistance. After a moment's pause, he confirmed that he had, elaborated, stating that he had chosen both a name and a base of operations. The Sky Palace within his own territory would serve as their headquarters. The name he had chosen for the resistance was Cathedral Palace. This moment was the culmination of long preparation, which began when Shin was merely 12 years old. He recalled his relentless training, reflecting that in the year and a half since his reincarnation, he had not been afforded a single moment to relax. During that time, he had observed that while Luna diligently managed the palace's activities, it was precisely in such moments of apparent peace that he could not let his guard down. Luna, for her part, pledged to do her best for his sake, reinforcing his belief that he was successfully avoiding the ruined flags of his former life. Focus was absolute. He shouted to his butler, Oliver, that he was counting on him again today to help him secure the Shin ending. Oliver roared back in enthusiastic agreement, ready to assist. Following his training, Oliver and Elle presented him with a newly tailored uniform. The garment was made to fit his developing frame, and with it on, his preparations were declared complete. Shin, however, simply stared at the outfit in confusion. As he stood there bewildered, Oliver remarked how well the uniform suited him. Elle, however, was overcome with excitement, joyfully shouting, "School! It really feels like it's about to begin." The word struck Shin with utter shock. "School," he stammered, looking at the grand building outside. For the grand edifice of the Royal Central Academy, Elriai's gasps in awe at its sheer size. It is here that noble children, upon turning 12, are obligated to attend an elementary course for 1 year. This is the same academy that Shin visited with the protagonist in the original story, he remembers. Explains to her that the academy boasts top-grade equipment and education, attracting nobles from all across the country to its prestigious halls. Brief thought of the recent past surfaces, Silsha celebrating the bountiful harvest their territory was enjoying. Shin reflects that it is a shame to leave just as their domestic reforms were taking off, but he has faith that Oliver and the others are competent enough to manage in his absence. Turns back to Elriai's, outlining his plan for the year. He intends to interact with the other nobles, learn all he can, and bring that new knowledge back to be used for the good of their territory. The academy is a unique melting pot. It is a place every noble must attend, no matter how minor their house. For some, it is a mission. Students are ordered by their parents to forge connections with the children of high-ranking nobles. Shin's thoughts reveal his true, secret goal. He knows the main story of this world has not yet begun, but he has already gathered many talented allies. With many of the original story's heroines attending this very academy, he sees this as the perfect opportunity to win them over. His objective for the year is clear: destroy as many ruined flags, potential future calamities, as possible. Internal monologue is interrupted by Elriai's. With a somber expression, she tells Lord Shin that since she cannot accompany him, she will instead do her best to become an even better maid while he is away. Melancholy vanishes in an instant. She leans in close, startling him, and points emphatically. She demands that he do the same, focus on his studies to become an even better lord. Caught off guard, a flustered Shin can only stammer his agreement. As Elriai's walks away, a woman with dark hair observes her departure from a shadowed archway. She notes that the maid has left. In the distance, Shin wonders aloud if Elriai's was in a bad mood. But the woman with dark hair simply states that as long as he understands, that's all that matters. Scene shifts to the Cathedral Palace, the command room for Shin's unit of 8 flowers. The dark-haired woman remarks that Shin will be going to school alone. She then teases Luna, suggesting she would have been jealous if Elriai's had accompanied him. Luna, flustered, vehemently denies it, while the other woman looks on, seemingly relieved. She blushed furiously as her companion chuckled, finding her reaction cute. Flustered, the young elf insisted they were to shut up and simply monitor the academy, as those were Lord Shin's orders. This was it. Within the academy's sunlit stone halls, The day's events would conclude after the exams. Inside, Shin Darkside stood for his assessment. A torrent of energy erupted from him, registering an unprecedented level of magic power. SSS. Display left the examiners utterly stunned. One declared him a true prodigy, the likes of which she hadn't seen in ages. Her colleague agreed, marveling at his raw talent as the magical assessment tool itself seemed to struggle, registering his power as a complex, fractured anomaly. Moments later, Luna rushed to his side, her earlier composure gone. She celebrated his magnificent performance, declaring that with an extra skill like dark attribute magic, his place in the top class was guaranteed. Shin, however, seemed taken aback. He wasn't the only one to notice. From a distance, Raigo watched with relief, thankful that their plan had worked as intended. Yet, he couldn't help but wonder why Shin didn't seem happy with the outcome. Young Lord's mind was racing with anxieties. He knew that if his true nature as a demon king were ever discovered, he would be executed on the spot. The ability was a common trait of the Demon King series, a skill for concealing one's true power. His gluttonous Demon King was merely masquerading as dark attribute magic, a deception that also hid his other skills. His internal turmoil was plain on his face. Luna, misinterpreting his distress, wondered why he wasn't happy, speculating that perhaps he had a stomach ache and needed medicine. Her thoughts then turned inward, worrying that if her own great spirit-type skills were discovered, it would cause a huge commotion. Concerns went unnoticed as he turned his attention to the newly posted class placements. A smile finally broke across his face. He had not only secured his place in the top class, but he had also confirmed that the very individuals he was searching for were there as well. With his first objective complete, he walked away, ready to prepare for what was to come. Steps into the grand lecture hall, his eyes scanning the rows of students already seated. His mission is clear: avoid the ruinous end that awaits his character. From the seats below, whispers begin as students recognize him as Shin Darkside, the infamous good-for-nothing noble. As he walks past, he overhears their hushed, fearful conversation. They speak of the rumors that he burdens his people with a 70% tax rate and live a life of royal luxury, leading one to remark that even this country has such a tyrant. Despite the animosity, he maintains a gentle expression. He had considered this a rare chance to perhaps make some friends, but the feeling of being an outcast is already settling in. Shoulders slump as he accepts that approaching them himself is likely impossible. Resigning himself to simply finding his seat, his path is suddenly blocked by a polished black loafer stepping firmly in his way. Looking up, he is met by the glare of a young woman with fiery hair and sky-blue eyes. She aggressively demands to know how someone like him entered the top class, immediately accusing him of bribery. Shin recognizes her instantly, identifies her as Cecilia Ignite, the original heroine from the story. A sword fighter with a unique skill, if Flame Emperor, she was known for her unbreakable spirit and was the complete opposite of Shin's villainous role. He notes that while it's been years since they last met, she clearly does not remember him. Cecilia's voice is sharp with disdain. She declares her status as being from a duke's house, far above his count's house, and commands him to know his place. Another student echoes her sentiment, calling Shin a disgrace. Shin realizes that quoting the Academy's rules about equality would be utterly pointless. Choosing diplomacy, he offers a polite apology to Lady Ignite. She lets out a dismissive humph, accepting his deference as long as he understands the social hierarchy. His knuckles whiten as he clenches his fist, forcing himself to manage his anger. Internally, he seethes at the insolent wench, but outwardly he remains composed, reminding himself she is just a child. At that moment, an instructor calls the class to order, telling everyone to take their seats for guidance. Now seated beside a student with glasses, Shin reflects. He had anticipated this kind of negative reception and believes he has planned more than enough countermeasures for these critical story moments, or flags. Settled on a course of action, his eyes gleaming with determination. The first step was what he called the friendship plan. This strategy was the conclusion he'd reached after contemplating how to avoid the disastrous ruin flags of this world. The solution seemed simple. He would just become friends with the original heroines. The reason that since most of his potential ruin was tied to these girls, befriending them now would allow him to meddle in events before the main story even began. In other words, he could break as many ruin flags as he wanted. A smug grin spread across his face at the thought. His first target was clear. The girl whose critical incident was set to occur in just 1 month. As the bell rang, signaling the lunch break, he knew it was time to head to the cafeteria and put his plan into action. Upon seeing her, he called out, "Lady Ignite." Internally, he prepared to unleash a technique he had perfected after countless hours of practice in front of a mirror. He beamed, deploying his most practiced good boy smile, and asked if she would like to eat lunch with him. Cecilia Ignite simply stared back, her expression one of cold, utter shock. The attempt was an immediate failure. Dejected, Shin walked away, acknowledging to himself that he knew it wouldn't be so easy. It was what it was. Spirits lifted, however, upon entering the elementary course cafeteria. As a fan of the original game, the sight of the delicious food was a dream come true. Deciding to eat first and move on to his next plan later, he eagerly grabbed a tray. Just as he was about to eat, a commotion erupted. A trio of students began harassing 2 others, shouting that the cafeteria wasn't a place for commoners and that they should eat outside. One of the bullies then turned on the pair, aggressively demanding who they thought they were. His meal forgotten, Shin looked over with irritation, asking why they couldn't just let the others eat in peace. The girl being bullied tried to argue that any student could eat there, but the lead bully cut her off, snapping back at Shin, calling him a dirty commoner. He listens as the bullies question his identity, sneering that unlike nobles, commoners at the academy are there because of actual competence. He introduces himself plainly as Shin Darkside. The 2 bullied students wonder why the son of a count is defending them. The lead bully, recognizing Shin's family name, offers condescending pity, remarking how it must be tough to be at the bottom of the hierarchy after being at the top in his own territory. Shin's expression darkens as he retorts, questioning if their pride is so pathetic that they must bully competent commoners just to feel important. Satisfied that he has drawn their focus, Shin turns to leave, telling the bullied students they can come to him if they need to vent. However, the lead bully commands him to wait. In a burst of fury, the bully gathers chunks of earth into his fist with magic, screaming that rank means nothing here as he lunges forward, intent on killing Shin. He roars for the wastrel noble to die, convinced that no one will care about his fate. Magical projectile shatters against a dark, unseen barrier just before it strikes Shin. The bullied girl stares in shock. With a cold gaze, Shin states that they started the conflict with verbal abuse and a sneak attack, questioning if they're truly nobles at all. Declaring his actions as self-defense, he unleashes his power. Through dark aura manipulation, a shadowy serpent, a black snake, erupts from the ground and coils around the stunned attacker, then closes the distance instantly with an advanced martial arts technique, hasty step flash, and delivers a sharp blow to the bully's face. The other aggressors can only watch, stunned by his strength, as Shin declares this a lesson. Suddenly, a hand grabs his arm, stopping him. He looks up, startled, to see Cecilia Ignite, who sternly warns him never to do that again. He immediately realizes how bad the situation looks. To an uninformed observer, the scene is damning. The so-called wastrel noble standing over the body of a knocked-out noble stares in horror as Cecilia Ignite glares back, her expression one of pure contempt. As he begins to plead, she cuts him off, her voice dripping with disgust as she declares him the worst. She turns away, confirming that she knew it all along. He is truly awful. Shin frantically tries to explain that it's a misunderstanding and he was only helping bullied students, but she dismisses him as a piece of trash who uses violence to force obedience. Cecilia remains unconvinced, accusing him of planning to bribe the students into lying for him. Shin retorts that they should be in the cafeteria and he will bring them as proof, but she coldly questions where these supposed students are. Without waiting for an answer, she commands him to never speak to her again and walks away. Shin watches her go, defeated, realizing his friendship plan has failed and that she is still the same person she has always been. Disastrous timing of the event leads him to a terrible conclusion. He wonders if this is the Scenario Correction Force, a power of the world that ensures its predetermined script is followed, correcting any deviations and pushing him toward a bad end. If that is true, he realizes he has no choice but to abandon Plan A. A new resolve hardens his features. He must deal with another urgent matter before Cecilia becomes a larger issue. It is time for the next plan. Meanwhile, the thief Shin had previously encountered lies defeated on the floor, ensnared by thin, sharp threads. He pleads with his unseen captor, insisting this wasn't their deal. He was promised freedom for revealing the location of the relic. A demonic woman with horns and long hair appears, holding a glowing prize. She mockingly tells the thief she did set him free from this world. As a shadowy, tailed silhouette of her stands in the background, she declares she is taking the item back for the greed